Ron Graham, part 2. And we did part 1 about a month ago. We talked a lot about the sports activity, children, all the variety of things, and about you. We talked about you and some of those activities. And I suspect you had a chance to watch it.
I have, yeah.
What's your reaction of seeing you about you?
I wasn't impressed. No, it was an honor. It was an honor, man, you know, just to be included in whatever this process is called or how it's identified. But I feel like I'm in company with a lot of good people.
Well, let me tell you some of the people we've interviewed in the past. It goes way back to Reg Lene, John Hamilton, Lillian Ney,
Well, it's a pretty good group.
and Ron Graham.
Yeah.
So just to let you know the company you keep.
Well, I couldn't afford the dues to be in that club, but
Me neither. That's why I'm interviewing people. We did focus a lot on you, your background, which was incredibly important. And then we did segue into a number of your programs, which sort of had an athletic tint to it, but children related. Similarly, there's another part of your extensive resume which deals with, programs in the arts world. And I've always thought of you as an athlete, not necessarily an arts guy, but in fact, Michael Flaxman has given me so much information about you in the arts world. So tell me, is there a background, perhaps, as we set this up, whether you had an interest growing up in the music, the arts, anything that would trigger this?
actually I had an interest in music and the arts before I even got spoiled with athletics.
Tell me.
Well, first of all, my family was very active in our church, and there was singing, choir singing 2 or 3 times a week. Sometimes we just go and it would be just a whole evening of singing, instead of a worship service. So I grew up wanting to sing. I can't sing, but I tried to fake it. And then that led me to just music in general. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, and my mother got me piano lessons, which I wish I would have continued with them, because I'd probably be pretty decent right now. But eventually I gravitated to the music program in the schools. And I think around 5th grade, that's when they come in and give you an instrument, let you try them all, and your parents can rent them. And so I went that route, and my mother rented me a saxophone. One of my favorite, at the time, at that young age, one of my favorite artists was a saxophone player. And so I kind of, his name was Stanley Turrentine, and I kind of got into his music a little bit and wanted to be like Stanley, so started with the saxophone, and it eventually led me to band at school.
No kidding.
I was doing sports at the same time, but music has always been a big deal.
So I'm thinking of Boots Randolph, and I'm thinking of Boots Graham on the saxophone,
Well, I think I heard once of Boots Randolph.
Yeah, just a name. It's a name. It's too good. So you kind of, you had this arts background and music background specifically, and at the same time, like any kid, you're working on the athletics, the baseball, basketball, football type of thing. And as things matured and you get into adulthood, what triggered an interest in Infinity?
I'll have to go back a little bit further back
Sure.
to get you there. When you're in the school music program, and that's when this thing got in my head. When you're in the school music program, if a student's not taking private lessons, then you can't advance. I mean, private lessons weren't mandated, because when you're in a band, you're in a section of saxophone section, so you got your book with your music in it that you play, and basically all you do, because you're getting ready for some sort of a performance, Thanksgiving program, Christmas programs, and those. So you just learn the music that's related to that performance. So I wasn't really learning, I was learning to read music, but only what we were going to play. I wasn't learning to read music from the standpoint of learning an instrument. So I had a band instructor at the time who wasn't the most positive when it came to encouraging kids. And we were playing away one day, and he stopped the band and told me to play the last line that, well, I muffed it all up. And he said to me, in front of the whole band, he says, "You're the worst saxophone player I've ever heard." Okay. So I basically quit the band. And that's when I went back to playing basketball. But that statement stuck out in my mind. And when I got old enough to think about it in adulthood, after having an athletic career and all that stuff, and after I just finished with Striders, I got to thinking about that. I'm saying, it's a sin, in my opinion, that a kid that wants to play an instrument can't play an instrument. That just doesn't make sense. And so I decided that I think I'll fix it. I think I'll figure out a way to do that so that kids like me that wanted to play, could learn to play, could learn to sing, to learn to whatever the art was, and didn't have to experience the embarrassment of it being called out that way. And so I decided to, well, there was 7 kids. Michael probably remembers some of this way back in the beginning. We had 7 young people who wanted to sing. They were in the a cappella choir, they were in the a cappella programs in the school, but they wanted to perform, sing. And so I got them together and we formed a little group, and that became Infinity. But at the same time, I started looking around for grant monies to buy instruments, because I knew a lot of the kids that I felt like we should touch couldn't even afford an instrument. And my mother, that's why I wasn't taking private lessons. She couldn't afford, I think it was $5 for 30 minutes. She couldn't afford that lesson. So I never took the lessons. But I was going to create an environment where whether or not you could afford it had nothing to do with it. It would be your desire to do it. You know, you had something in you that wanted to be artistic, and so because you can't afford $5 a week for a music lesson, or even an instrument, I figured, okay, we'll just provide them, and that's what we did through. After I kind of got connected with Carol Lawrence and Mike and Philip Morris at the Arts Council, we started chasing grants and monies and foundations and bought some instruments. I remember I bought we got a grant that bought about 50 violins that we gave to Nina Carbacca so that she could do the same things with the kids in her Suzuki program.
Yeah.
Because she said there's kids that they have to share a violin when they come to, so we got those kids all equipped and we got it set up that way. I just felt like it wasn't right for a kid to want to do something and not be able to do it because of economic circumstances.
So you started with a small group. Mike was reminded me that it sort of began in somebody's living room.
Yes.
Do you remember who that was?
Well, that was a young man by the name of Steve Davis.
Steve Davis.
And he's a local musician here. He's paid his dues like a lot of other musicians. And but he was 12 years old. He was a phenomenal kid because he grew up in the church too. Mark Alpaugh was a pianist at Manual Baptist Church. And Steve was about 7. There was a drum kit in the church. Mark would play every Sunday for the Manual Baptist choir. There was a drum kit in there that nobody ever touched. So Steve went up one Sunday and just sat down at the drum kit and started keeping time with what Mark was doing, and that became it. He learned to play, Steve can read music, but he plays by ear.
Yeah.
And he's phenomenal, man. He can play with anyone. He can hear something once and play it with all the nuance and all the artistic flair that he's supposed to do it. So we started with Steve and his sister, and it was basically in their living room. And I had Mark Alpaugh and Bill Ward stop by one night, and I said, these kids, I think they have something. Would you listen to them and tell me what you think? And so Mark and Bill both listened, and they said, yeah, they got some ability. We can work with them. And so that's how we called it Infinity, because something told me that if it got off the ground, it would go on for a long time.
Yeah.
And so that's how we got it started.
Just an aside, I can remember Steve Davis coming here, performing, and everybody just totally wowed away.
Yeah.
And it was still probably junior high or high school, but whatever it was just incredible.
Talented young man.
Yeah.
He heads up, he's leading his own band, and everybody wants him to play.
Yeah.
So bands will call him up, and he plays piano, bass guitar, and drums. And everybody wants him to play.
Yeah.
So, but that's kind of how the whole thing got off the ground. And then
You had to kind of wrap it in a structure, though. I mean, this is an Ron Graham idea. You bring in, because you're very good at networking, you bring in the Bill Wards, the Mark Alpaugh to sort of double check your thinking, but you still have to have a entity to help you. Is that where the Arts Council came in?
absolutely.
Yeah.
And it only made sense. Philip Morris was still the director at that time, and Carol Lawrence was there. Michael was there. And I never had to convince them of the potential for this. Philip just jumped right on it.
Sure.
Philip was like that, and I think it still is, I would hope. But he had a way of visioning something. He could see it, and he also had a way of getting it done. I think that's the thing that impressed me probably the most about Philip is he could figure out a way to get the job done, and he did. As far as Infinity is concerned, I mean, we ended up with space right down there on 3rd Street, which was Arts Council. That was the Arts Council building, right, Michael? Arts Council space. We had to go in and put a little sweat equity into it to make it. I don't think it would even pass inspection because the city inspectors kind of like were maybe looking the other way, but we got it done, and we created a little studio for these kids. And they could come right from the high school right over there. And then Carol and Philip too, both of them, they knew where the money was. So just like Carol with the Strider Field track,
Right.
she knew where it was at. It was just that there was a different focus.
At the time, I think she was also working with working for Gabby, I think.
Yeah, I don't know if she was with Gabby. She was working for Gabby when I first met her.
Okay, that could be.
I don't know. I think she was working just for the Arts Council. Do you remember, Michael?
I don't.
I think she was just working for
Okay.
the Arts Council at that
Yeah,
point.
but she knew the people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it happened. So the next thing you know, we would be able to buy keyboards, and I hired local musicians, and I think we paid them $20, no, $10 a lesson for a 30-minute lesson. And I had most of the musicians in town that, whether they could read music or not, whether they were technically, professionally trained or not, wasn't important.
Mm-hmm.
They were musicians. They knew how to access and manipulate a musical instrument, and they understood performing and music, and that was enough. So some of the kids weren't learning to read music, they were just learning how to play music, but they became phenomenal. So it was kind of that way for quite a while. The next thing that we did was we wanted to find opportunities for the kids to perform. So we started doing Rotary Club, started doing all the little social club things, and letting the kids play, and then somebody would hear us, call the Arts Council, can the kids come over and play for this reception or that reception? And we accepted everything.
Sure.
So these little guys, they were performing in front of adults. The important thing was that the adults were seriously interested in their music. It wasn't, oh, isn't he a cute little boy? Look at he's so good. Look at No, they understood that these kids were legitimately making music, and they enjoyed it. So eventually, we turned the little storefront that we had there on 3rd Street into a little performance venue.
Mm-hmm.
And set it up and had like a restaurant type of venue set up in there. So every Friday night, it was Infinity Night.
Mm.
So the place would be packed. It'd be jam-packed. I mean, I think that's why the code inspectors were having a little bit of an issue with it, because we had a lot more people in there than we were supposed to have. But then again, that was the fun. I mean,
Yeah.
I figured, God forbid something happened, but we'd all get out. So that went on for quite a while. So that's just kind of how it kind of got up and started.
And you were still under the umbrella of the Arts Council.
Absolutely.
And at what point did you sit down with your advisory group and say, we gotta launch ourselves?
I think that was always in the mix. I think it was always the expectation. I know I had it, and I think I was able to convince Carol and Philip and the people that were there for us. I think I was able to convince them that it needed to happen. So I think everybody saw it as being something potentially bigger than what it was. But there were no obstacles. That was the thing. There was no obstacles to doing it. Money wasn't an obstacle because I was able to secure the grant dollars, buy the instruments, pay the instructors, and do all of that stuff. Facilities weren't the obstacle, because we had our little studio, but then we also had access to the Reg Linné. I can't think of how many programs we did in the Reg. Just Infinity, we had 8 or 9 groups, and we negotiate with Philip and the people at the Reg, Keith, and we'd get the Reg for a steal.
Family discount.
family discount. And now we had maybe 9 or 10 bands. Each band could come out and play 20 minutes or something like that, and all the parents would be there. We never, I think we came close to filling up the house once or twice, but the thing about the Reg was it's so big. If you put 200 people in this venue, it's packed. You put 200 people in the Reg and they're all sitting in one little section. But we got through with it. The kids loved it.
Sure.
The kids loved it. So, and then more and more people started to take an interest, and we got a phone call from all people, Don King.
Okay.
Right. Don King had somehow heard about our group. I don't think he'd ever heard the group, but he had heard about it. And he was going to be doing a reunion at a jazz club in Cleveland that he used to be connected to. It's called the Corner Tavern. And some real great R&B and jazz artists would come through there. And they wanted to highlight some kids. And so he asked, he says, I hear you have this group. Would you want to bring them to Cleveland and help us celebrate, I don't know, it's probably the 25th anniversary of this tavern? Mm-hmm. And I said, absolutely. So we loaded the kids on a bus and went over there and played, and then they had a chance to meet Jimmy McGriff, who's a great organ player.
Sure.
And they met all the musicians that they were there, and it was just a great thing. I sit back and I watch the kids in awe at these professionals. And so it just it kind of grew like that. Then the next thing we had was, I heard that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame would, from time to time, have youth groups come in and perform. I said, well, that fits us. I think we went to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame 3 times.
No kidding.
Yeah. So
Terrific.
the venues and the opportunities just came naturally because the kids were so engaged and so good that people wanted to hear them.
So you have this opportunity. You've now left just the local venues. You have had the foresight and luck to grab on to other activities. How did that play in because you're a fundraiser, you're good at raising money. You got to present yourself as a product. You're selling a product that is worthy of funding. How did the foundations react to all of this?
I can tell you that I never experienced, whether it was Striders or Infinity, any one of the local foundations being hostile or not reacting, and that's maybe a better way to put it, to what we were doing. Those people, even though they were the ones that were controlling the resources, they bought into it. It wasn't a hard sell. I had Betty Shelton. She came in the studio one day. She was walking up the street. She just walks in and she sees the kids in there rehearsing. She comes, I knew who she was. I don't know if anybody else did. She comes in, she sits down at one of the tables, and she just sat there. And she was enjoying what those kids, and I'm talking about these kids were like 10, 11, 12 years old. And she was just into it. And then I saw the opportunity, and I said, took her a can of pop over and sat down, and she said, you need to probably send me something. That's just how it was. And it was the same thing with all the founders. I don't recall a rejection letter, ever.
Wow.
I don't. I mean, I'm sure that there was, and there were a lot of times where I didn't get everything you asked for, but I don't ever recall being turned down by any of the locals. And not only the local foundations, but there were service clubs. There were other organizations that were willing to invest in it. And so nobody ever questioned it. I was amazed at that.
I can recall at some point where you had, you decided you'd move across the street into the ramp. What was the motivating factor there?
We ran out of room.
Yeah,
The storefront, I don't know if you were ever in the storefront.
there was.
I think there's a dress shop there or something. I don't know what's in there. We ran out of room. We had the main floor, which is where our little cafe was. There was one small room that we used as a rehearsal room, a lesson room. When we weren't performing, we did lessons in this corner and this corner. And then there was a basement that really wasn't code accessible. And I hustled up some building material donations. I went to the lumber stores and everybody that could go donate something. And we got building materials, and I found some tradesmen, carpenters and lawyers and people that could do the work. And they came in and they kind of went down in that basement and made it acceptable, but it didn't meet code. So I knew that at some point, if the program continued to grow, that we would have to get out of there. And that place was sitting over there empty. And I went to the city, talked to the mayor, Sam Teresi. He gave me a key, and I went in and looked around. It was leaking. It had water leaks, and there's a lot of things going on. But there was an initiative. I can't think of what it was called, but it was statewide, and it was an arts initiative. And they had uncovered a big pot of money somewhere. And so I said, well, this might have to be what we fall back on. So we wrote some grants. I had a lot of help writing that grant because it was a big grant. We wrote some grants, and I think we got like $150,000 or something like that. And then we remodeled the whole ramp, put it all together, built lesson rooms. We built a recording studio in there. We had a regular cafe for cafe nights, and then there was all these little rooms all through there that we turned into lesson rooms. It worked out great.
And you were there for a long time.
Yeah, I was there I was there about 15 years.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah. I'm trying to, the dates escape me now, but from probably about, I know I was still there after 2000. And I think we started up around 91 or 92.
And all these
I should remember that, but I don't.
all these programs were after school, right? So you didn't have to affect the school time period, did you?
Most of them were, but we also had situations where, on occasions, once in a while, we would be able to do some stuff in the school. Michael, I can't think of the initiative that we tapped into with the Arts Council. I can't think of the name.
It might have been part of the Empire State Partnerships.
That might have been it.
COSER also was the funding source for a lot of that. COSER?
Yeah,
COSER.
the stuff that we got closer.
Yeah, BOCES, COSA.
And so what happened then is that the schools did allow the kids to have access to rehearsing and playing some in the schools. But it was still mostly not in the school.
One of the things that struck me, and I was an outsider looking in, that there was, in order to be part of Infinity, likewise Striders, you didn't have to audition or take a test. You were kind of free enrollment, open enrollment, I guess is a better term. Is that, what was that your philosophy?
Yes. I was turned away when I was a kid. I didn't want any kid to ever be turned away from an opportunity that was good for that child. So I built it so that there were no barriers. The only barrier that a child had to overcome was his attitude, his or her attitude. If you were interested in music or sports, and you were able to demonstrate that you could be serious about it, and that you were the kind of person that was able to conduct themselves in a certain way, that's all the barrier was.
Yeah.
I did have some requirements. With Striders, it was the tutoring. Every kid had to come to tutoring.
Yep.
I got onto, with a woman by the name of Judith Guile, I got onto portfolios. So we had all of the kids, in order to be in Infinity, you had to develop your own portfolio. So basically what that amounted to was a 3-ring binder, like a blue school notebook. And there were certain things that you had to have in that portfolio at certain times. You had to have examples and samples of the music that you were playing. You had to write an essay or something of that nature on your favorite artist. You had to write a career plan, what you were going to do. If you plan to do something with the arts, fine. If not, that was fine too. You had pictures. When they performed someplace, they were supposed to take pictures and put it in there. And we put these portfolios together. And then I was able to get the Chautauqua County Youth Bureau to give us some funding because we were building portfolios. They liked that idea of youth development, having kids develop their own portfolios. And a lot of these kids use those portfolios in other areas. I know one boy actually used his Infinity portfolio when he applied to Berkeley School of Music, and he used his Infinity portfolio in his application
Okay,
process.
great.
Yeah. So never any requirements. It didn't cost you money. You just had to bring a good attitude, and that was all anybody had to do. And we had a lot of kids. We had a lot of kids that brought those attitudes. So
Structure-wise, you were the director. Did you have a board? Did you?
yes, I had a board of directors, and we had the board did what the boards do. But we had other people. We had other, not boards, but we had other entities that were kind of looking over they were like monitoring the program for us. I think the board actually put that together.
Yeah.
The board put it together so the other folks were like watching over our shoulder.
An advisory board, I bet.
Yes, that's what it was.
Uh,
But nobody ever, there was never an obstacle or a stumbling block at the board level or at the advisory level in front of the program. People understood what it was doing and how we were doing it, so.
Striders, Infinity, which both continued to this day.
Praise the Lord.
And if you had to alter anything, I mean, to me, these have been hugely successful operations under your leadership, guidance, and inspiration, and a lot of sweat equity. But if you had to kind of, for the next generation, suggest how it might be altered or changed, is there such a thought?
Well, yeah, and I don't want to say it in such a way that it sheds a negative light on the Infinity now, because it's a great program. It's still going. One of the things that it lost, and not intentionally, but it just happened. It lost its diverse inclusion. When I started, I mean, we were doing programs in the elementary schools. I was in Love School. I was in elementary schools in the city. Well, you have a diverse population of kids, and these kids were gravitating to it. And then as they got older into it, we had black and brown kids from the city, from Jamestown, and we had white and whatever other kind of kids that came into it from the suburbs. So we had kids from Maple Grove. Our bands were multi-ethnic. We had kids from Maple Grove and Southwestern and Frewsburg and all of these places. I don't want to say that I was the one that was holding it together, but it seemed like after I left, the focus changed a little bit. If I were advising someone, I know that I've talked to people who were connected to the Infinity program who said it's not the same as it was. It's not like it was before.
Mm-hmm.
And I acknowledged that. And I told them, I said, well, what you're not doing and what they're not doing, and I don't think they're doing it now, is they're not doing any outreach. You have to go out there and find, these kids are out there. You got to go find them. Because most of them are out there waiting for something to do, wanting something to do. And if you don't have anybody that's accessing the schools or accessing the kids in the neighborhoods where they live, or in some way just showing up and saying, hey, you're important to me, come on, let's do this. And I think that's what they got away from. I did that before. That was my main role. I'm not a musician, can't play anything, can't teach a kid to play. But I could go to the right pockets and find kids that wanted to do it. And I think the thing that they had in common, they were not all minority youth, but they were all in some way needy youth. They needed, whether it was something to do or somebody to latch on to them or whatever. But I mean, a lot of them couldn't afford the instruments, so that was a given.
Yeah.
We're going to buy your instruments, you know. So they all fell into that category of being kids of need, whether they were white, black, or brown, didn't make a difference. But I think the Infinity, and this is not, like I say, it's not a negative light on the people that are running it, because I know the people that are running it, and I know they're doing a great job. But they also know that it's not like it was at one point. And I think that if they knew how to change that, they would. I joke, though, I know how to change it. But my day is past. But I think I know how I could go in and make that different. But at the same time, I didn't want to step on the toes of the people that were working hard at it every day. So.
We've talked about Infinity, we've talked about Striders, we've talked about you. But these aren't the only initiatives that you've been involved in. I know Ed Tomasini has mentioned the fact that his programs that he done teaching people how to use cameras like today. I mean, in many senses, there's a Ron Graham fingerprint on all of that.
There's 3 or 4 handfuls of fingerprints on all of that. Mine just happens to be one of them. But yeah, we did all kinds of things with the videography program that was kind of being run through the Arts Council. Mm-hmm. We had kids involve themselves in I guess if I say the videography program, that's what it was.
Yeah.
But kids got engaged and involved in that. And other things. I mean, just I'm getting too old to try to remember all of this stuff.
Well, what's remarkable, and I say that with humility, is the fact that you have spent a lifetime dealing with kids.
Yes,
And we're at a time when it's easier sometimes to deal with adults. But you are dealt with kids and convincing adults that they need to deal with kids because that's our future.
yep.
And sometimes that can be exasperating, but sometimes it can be very enhancing and enlightening. And you've found that touch.
Well, it wasn't hard. A lot of it, I based it on my own experiences. So it was a lot of it was like, well, it's like the situation in the junior high school band with the instructor. I know how I felt. I can't imagine how, if that's the way he went about teaching, I can't imagine how many other kids fell into that situation. So that's totally unexcusable. There's no reason that you should steal a kid's fire. I was red hot to play this saxophone. I wanted to be a horn player. When he told me I had no musical ability, I said, well, he's a music teacher. I guess he knows what he's talking about. But to have, I think, maybe to go back to what you just said, I've always found it easier to work with the kids than I have the adults. You know, because kids, they don't bring any agenda. They don't bring anything but themselves. And it goes without saying, I'm sure you know this, I'm sure Michael knows it too. Sometimes when you're dealing with adults, they have an agenda. There's a reason that they want to be connected to something. And it's not always visible right in the front, but eventually you come to find it out. And those are the situations that gave me the most trouble, when I wasn't falling into somebody else's agenda. But the kids, if a kid said it's blue, it's blue. You know, and it was just so much easier that way.
Part of the teaching process, so you mentioned it, is not only to have recipients of the teaching, that's the kids, but also teaching teachers how to teach.
Oh, yeah.
Was that part of your agenda?
I would say informally, yes. I think we all realize that everybody is not equipped to teach. Everybody that is teaching is not equipped to teach. So what we try to do is find ways that we can allow teachers the freedom and the flexibility of doing things outside the box. And so I think that's one of the things that we did. We gave, and I'm talking about public school teachers, but I'm also talking about the music teachers too. We gave them the opportunity to kind of climb out of the box and do some things. Like, I can remember the a cappella program at the high school, and I'm mentioning these things not to be critical of them, because all of our music programs are great. And a lot of kids gravitated to all the music programs at Jamestown High School and at the other schools. But they were structured in such a way that it didn't necessarily pique the interest of the kids. Kids wanted to do Broadway stuff, and they wanted to do R&B stuff, and they wanted to sing, and they wanted to dance and move. And it seemed like sometimes the instructors, oh no, we got to do this. Now maybe that was because the regents said you had to do that. I don't know. But I think they lost a lot of kids. There were a lot of kids that would have been more active had some of those barriers not been in place, you know, for them to do it. So, but that, like I say, it's important for me to always acknowledge that. That's not to take anything away from all those people that were doing that. It's just that I look at it like this. Everybody doesn't have the same vision. And a lot of those teachers, their vision was what what was right in front of them. And they found themselves in the box. Maybe some of them wanted to get out of that box as much as we wanted them to, but they just didn't know how to go about doing that within that structure of the school district. But Nina Karbaka was out of the box. Nina could charge up a bunch of kids and have them doing stuff. I've seen little kids dance with their violins and all of that stuff, And there were other. Mark Alpall was another one as far as the teaching. Sometimes the school district here again, I'm trying to pick these words really careful. Sometimes the school district was so bound and intent on doing this that they missed the opportunities of letting it be something special. They were so hung up on, well, maybe they won't let us, or we can't do that, or my department head, or you can't do it. I mean, with Judith, Guile used to say, whenever somebody would say they can't do it, she would say, well, let's ask why. Well, there's a training called Covey training. Judith I've been through Covey, but there's a 7 whys in Covey training. By the time you ask why 7 times, the logical answer that most people get to is, well, we just never done it that way. Hello.
Yeah.
So now all we got to do is do it that way. Why can't we do it? Well, because the board of education won't do this. Well, why? Because so and so won't do this. Why? Because the teachers union won't let you do this. Why? And so by the time we get through 7 whys, somebody would finally say, well, we just never tried to do it. That's what happened with the youth apprenticeship program. The youth apprenticeship program went through the 7 whys. I even took counselors through that process. Let's do this youth apprenticeship program for these kids. Well,
For the camera, what was the youth apprenticeship program? Would you just explain it?
at the time, there was a lot of discussion around workforce preparation, how we are not preparing kids to enter the workforce. We're not preparing them well to enter the workforce. And so there was youth initiatives, youth apprentice initiatives all over the country. And Judith and I caught on to one and met a man by the name of Ben Woods from Cornell University. And Ben was doing youth apprenticeships in New York State through Cooperative Extension. And he came down here and he helped us put it together. We had Cummins Engine, MRC, WCA Hospital. We had electrical shops. We had all these young little businesses around the community that would take an apprentice. And that's what we had probably, when we were full board for a couple of years there, we probably had 25 or 30 kids doing youth apprenticeships. And it's funny because it's come full cycle. Because once Judith retired and I kind of backed off it a little bit, it dissipated. But now there's a nationwide initiative. They realized that they didn't solve the problem. And there's a nationwide initiative to develop youth apprenticeships. And there's no reason why you can't do it. You know, we can have in fact, there's probably going to be something coming up pretty soon around that with my daughter. You can have police officer apprentices. You can have firemen apprentices. You can have anything. You can turn it into an apprenticeship. And I think that's going to happen again. But here again, it's usually when people don't see the end game. So we had counselors say, well, we can't do that. Well, why? Well, because we have to mess up the schedule. You know, with the way the scheduling, we have to, and we can't get these kids out of school in the middle of the day, and da-da-da-da-da. Well, why? Well, because of the scheduling and this and that. Well, why? Well, the teachers want this and that. And finally, we got to the point with the people that we were trying to convince that they just had to admit, well, we've never done it before. That changes the whole equation. We've never done that before. Well, okay, let's figure out how to do it. And that's what we did. And so the apprentice program got off and running, and it was very popular. In fact, I had a chance to go to Washington, D.C. to represent Chautauqua County Cooperative Extension at a youth apprenticeship symposium. And I presented a white paper there that kind of fell in line with what all the other, there was a lot of that kind of activity there. So it was something that I had an opportunity to do.
Do you ever pause and reflect on what you've accomplished in your lifetime?
I don't know if pause and reflect would be the way to describe it. Every once in a while I start thinking about things that I did, but I don't dwell on it that much. But every once in a while I'll reflect on things. I don't pause.
I can't imagine you pausing on anything, but you're right, that's probably not the term. No moss grows on Ron Graham. We've spent a couple of sessions here talking about it. Is there something that we haven't touched upon that is you'd kind of like for the record to make sure we have that, your thoughts on that?
I'll tell you, Greg, for me it's about, when I do pause and reflect, I think about all the people that came to my aid. You know what I mean? I think about all the people in this community that somehow I was able to sell them on some crazy idea, and they bought it. And anything that I've accomplished or done hasn't been in a vacuum. I've had too many people step up and participate with me. So the pausing and the reflection is more on me and how I interacted with a whole host of different people. And that's where most of it comes in. You know, I did projects with Bridgetta Overcash. Bridgetta and I spent a month working after work hours, writing a grant for the Safe House. You know, just writing other grants, working with other people who had ideas. There have been people who come to me with an idea. What do you think? Why not? You know, all we can do is fail. So you just get up and you try it a different way. So for me, that's more of it than anything else. And that includes a lot of people. It includes you. You know, it includes Michael. It includes the people that I was at the Arts Council and with Striders and the school district. It's just too many people that have kind of participated in my life for me to, I can't put that on me. I don't know if that makes sense to you or not, but I have a hard time overlooking the help that I had. I can't do it.
Is there a question I've missed? Is there something I should say? Ron?
Well, if the purpose of this was to figure out everything, yeah, we missed a lot. I don't think there's a question that you've missed. I think that what you've done by encouraging me to come here and do this has been a very positive thing for me. And if we miss something, so be it. You know, if there's, I know that there are. There are things, you know, I'm 74 years old, so the mind doesn't work like it used to. So there's stuff that I don't want to say I can't remember, but I don't remember. And if there's something missed, you know, it's still there. Somebody knows about it, right?
We'll bring him in.
Yeah, yeah. So expand your interview process, that somebody will throw something at me.
Well, this has been remarkable. You're remarkable, Ron, and I know you've touched an awful lot of lives, and your humility will not permit you to say, yeah, you're right, Greg, because that's not you. But let me just say it, and on so many fronts, when I think about the music, the sports, the education, the civil rights, you know, you've lived out your beliefs, and that's a remarkable statement. I thank you for all you've accomplished in our community.
Well, I thank you for such a kind compliment. I decided that this is where I'm going to live. I mean, I made a decision. I'm not, my resume isn't floating around out there so I can find another job someplace. This is where I'm choosing to. I raised my family here. I own property here. This is where I chose to live. So I've always been somebody that I never liked the naysayers. I guess naysayers have been my biggest obstacle. I've heard people say things about Jamestown, complain about it, yeah, all of that stuff, you know, just complain. And I'm saying, hey man, why don't you just do something about that? You know, you can do something about it. You don't have to just. So I've tried to never. I think I can be negative about Jamestown at times, but not to the extent that I'm going to be complaining or wishing I was someplace else or cursing the city. There's too much good stuff here, man. There's a lot of good stuff here. And you have to kind of look for, you know, if you look for the bad, you're going to be successful. You're going to find it. If you're looking for negative, you're going to find it, man. It's there. There's negative right outside the door when I leave here. So you have to kind of believe in the city and believe in the people that you're working with. I have not found much difference in a lot of people. Most of them want to see this community grow and be successful and want to raise their kids here. So do it. You know, do it. Don't badmouth it, man. So I'm grateful and thankful that you've given me this opportunity to rattle on about whatever I've rattled on about. But you've given me the opportunity to be a part of this process that you've been involved in for so long. And I thank you for what you do. Somebody needs to interview you.
That would be a good one. Thank you. Mike, any questions that you were dying to ask?
Any questions, Ron?
That you want to ask Ron for the camera here?
No, not really, not right now.
Okay, now give me your best Michael Flaxman story, Ron. You know, something where you can look back and you can say, let me tell you about Michael Flaxman.
Well, Michael Flaxman and I are friends, and we have been for a long time. I think the thing that I recall most about Michael, and actually I admired him for it, he's passionate. And I've been in meetings with Michael where the meeting wasn't going the way it should be going, or Michael felt like it should be going, and Michael would let his passion shine through. And basically he would get to a point where he wouldn't blow up or anything like that, but you knew that he was passionate about it. And so the way in which he conducted himself said to me, you need to pay attention to what he's doing and what he's saying. I've always respected you for that. You've never been one to shy away from communicating what you believe, and that's a big deal. And so that's what I remember the most of Michael. I don't know, there's probably stories that I'm missing something, Michael, someplace, but
Like,
Everything you just said about me, I could say about you.
well, thank you. I take that as a compliment, brother.
I loved working with you.
And you know, and sometimes you have to survive on your passion. Sometimes, you know, you have to go back and, okay, I was a little bit over the top maybe on that one, or a little bit, but you know something? That's just the way I saw it, and that's the way it's going to be. Now, there may be people that don't like it that you're that way. There may be people that feel like you should be able to communicate in a different way. And I always say, you know, get over it. They'll have to get over it. You know, if I'm passionate about it, the same goes for my brother here. You got to figure out how to get over that, man. Because if you're not passionate about something, it's hard to get something to happen.
That's right.
Right? How do you make something happen? If Philip hadn't been passionate about the vision he had for the Reg all those years, if he hadn't been passionate about that, it wouldn't have happened. And there's other people in this community that have passion about what they do. And if they hadn't been, they would have been put down and they would have gone by the wayside. So I admire those folks. And people that can't deal with that, I just have to say, gee, I'm sorry, I really hope you get over that. I hope you don't lose too much sleep over that because you need to deal with it. So,
You talked a lot about vision. There are very few people anywhere that have vision. You are one of those people. You are one of the few.
well,
You have done, as a private citizen, more for this community than almost anybody I can name. I know you're humble about it. I know you don't want to give yourself a lot of credit. You've always been a servant leader. You want other people to own the results of what you've done and the work that they've done, but you want people to own that. That said, it required your vision to get them over a certain line, even if they thought at the end, which they should think, they should know that they own it. They should think that they own it. But I want you to know that you got most of those people to the place where they could buy into a vision and know, I want you to know that a lot of stuff that has happened in this community would not have happened unless you were there.
well, man, that is very, very flattering to hear you talk like that, my friend. I guess I have, if you think you have something good, then it's worth fighting for. And if I upset you because I'm fighting for something that I think is good
Yeah,
for the youth in this community or for the community as a whole,
yeah.
and I'm gonna put up a fight. And I've lost a lot of them. You don't win them all. Some of them you just kind of get knocked on your butt and you, okay, if that's the way it's gonna be, it's gonna be, you know, but I believe that you have to put up a fight. If it's not worth it for you to fight,
That's
then
right.
it probably wasn't worth it, it wasn't gonna happen, you know? So I view it that way. I've done projects with my brother Ed over here too. Ed and I have worked on a number of things together, out of the box sort of things. But I will say that I can't say that there have been a lot of people that fought me. There have been some that maybe didn't understand why, and it took them a little while to get there. But I can't think of anyone that caused me and that person to go like that, to separate because we were so opposite. And that's just, that's why I think that if most people want the good, sometimes people just don't understand how you get to the good.
And that's what you showed them, Ron.
Well, then praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. If that's what I brought to the equation, then I did my little piece. But what I'm saying, so that you understand, is that there are a lot of little pieces. You've had a little piece. People I've come in contact with have had pieces of this. And if it was if it's no more than the encouraging words that you're saying to me now, that I've heard, that's a piece. That's an affirmation that I might be on the right track. You know what I mean? So that's the way I take it.
There's no might. There's no might about it. You are on the right track.
Well, thank you, man.
I think one thing that you and I share in common, and I say this in the most loving way, we made our way in the world by being total pains in the ass.
Yeah, I signed up for that.
I am really glad you signed on to that.
I signed up for that because I know when those moments have ripped me. I know when I've been a pain in somebody's butt. And it was not for the sake of being a pain in somebody's butt.
Right.
It was for the sake of, this is good. And until you give me a good reason that I shouldn't do it, I'm going to be a pain in your butt.
Yep.
It's going to happen until you give me a reason that it shouldn't happen.
And you never did it because you wanted something for yourself. You did it because you wanted something for others. And your focus was on the kids. And you learned from your experience that the kinds of reactions that maybe you didn't get, like with that saxophone thing, broke my heart to hear you say that. But you turned that into such a good that, you know, you took that pain that you had and you turned it around and literally, Ron, hundreds of children, maybe thousands of children, well, it's thousands of children,
It is.
have not suffered the pain that you did because of the work you did.
Well, I'm hoping, Michael, I would hope that the majority of citizens in this community could see and be willing to do the same thing. That there are people out there that could do or could understand the same thing. You know, if it's hurting it, if it's not benefiting a child, then what is your existence for? What are you doing here, man? And at the same time, you're making a statement about your community. You know, you're making a statement about this young person growing up here in Jamestown. And I I would not be honest if I didn't say that there's a biblical, I don't want to get religious on you, but there's a biblical scripture that has meant a lot to me over the years. And it says, let your light shine before men so that you can glorify your Father in heaven. And so that's been my mission. You know, I'm doing it to God's glory. I haven't preached to kids, but I've tried to emit the example to them.
You walk the talk, Ron.
Well, yeah, I guess that's maybe the way.
You walk the talk.
Well, you have to, man. And if you don't walk the talk, you're phony. Maybe. But I have to do that. I have to always do that. I never preached or done that type of witness to the kids
That's right.
because I know that everybody's not on the same page. And just because I'm on that page doesn't mean that I expect everybody else to be on. And there may be parents, and I knew there would be parents that didn't appreciate that. Don't preach to my kid. You know, don't. We have our own faith. We have our own this. You know, I don't believe that stuff. I just don't want you preaching to my kids. It was the same thing with the school district. You know, I heard this separation of church and state stuff so much that it makes me sick. But there's a lot of people that in the school district that can't go there because of that very thing. But I believe I have to. So what I've done is I've tried to be, I don't think there's a kid that I've been involved with that didn't know how I felt and what I believed. Because I try to show it to them in everything I do. Even the way of not punishing them, but admonishing them for behaviors, just to let them see that there's another way of going about doing it. So it means a lot to me that I've had a chance to do this with you. Thank you. I remember I wrote you I remember I wrote you a letter one time, and you probably don't remember.
Me?
Greg.
Okay.
And it was more of a political statement. But I was on a trip for Cummins. And we were involved in a meeting of people who were talking, Cummins was talking about its stand on race and race relations and race issues. Very good conversation going on, and I was thinking, right now where I'm here participating in this, Rehnquist was here. I wrote you that letter that night. Mm-hmm. I said, I didn't like him for the things that he stood for. But he was here. And I'm saying, here I am out here in Denver, I think that's where we were, and I'm involved in this dialogue here, and back home, no, I probably shouldn't have written you that letter, but it just came out.
I probably sold it on eBay. Check my files.
But thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you, Ed, for doing what you do, brother, and thank you for being here. It means a lot to me. It means a lot to me. They did a little benefit for me this past weekend. They had a road race to raise money to help me with my medical bills, which is just more than I could absorb, that people would do this. But it turned out to be a great event, man. There were people there that I hadn't seen for 35, 40 years. And so many people. Mike Ricketts came up to me, and I didn't know Mike was suffering with cancer himself. And Mike came up and we reconnected on some stuff in the back. And Mike is another one of those people. And there were just others, Jack Volker.
Yeah.
You know, there was just a lot of friends that I saw that were there, you know, and it was overwhelming for me. So that's a reward. When people come together and do something like that for you, you can't say anything but thanks, but that's just a good feeling. So what you see is what you get, man.
We get a lot. We get an awful lot. You're quite the deal. You're the real deal. So thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Ed. We've done a lot of thanks here all of a sudden, but it's been a wonderful 2 sessions.
Well, I'm proud to be a part of it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. All right, Ed, we're going to shut off before everybody goes into tears here, so look at that.
Tears.
Oh, no, all this accolades that keep coming here, you'd say, well, enough. You know.
Enough. Thank you, man.
Thank you. Hey.